What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Nolecast, recording this on Thursday morning as the Masters gets ready to kick off here. Got it on the screen, and what a great time to have a little Nolecast action. Hopefully, there's no weather delay for the Masters this weekend, but if there is, that's a pretty good time to fire up the Nolecast and get your listening in if you don't want to listen to it on the way home from work on Thursday, or maybe to work on a Friday, or maybe during work. That's kind of multitasking, right? If you get the headphones in with the Nolecast, maybe you got the multiple screens going, got the Masters up on one TV, and maybe some spreadsheets or something, spreadsheets up on your other TV. Thanks as always to the legendary home loans team. They absolutely crushed for us. Chad absolutely crushes it there for us with legendary team. 844 FSU loan. 844 FSU loan is the number to call. We've done 600 loans with these guys. 600. That's insane. Legendary team crushes. Chad crushes. I'm actually buying another property right now through Chad, so it's going to be absolutely fantastic. Let's get into some of these questions that come from our Patreon supporters. So first one here, got to pull it up. How important is it for Mike to play young guys to sell the future? It's a pretty good question from Eric. And I wonder, who is the intended target for the sale, right? So on the whole, I think it is somewhat important if your goal is to have success long term. And I think that's clearly a goal for Mike Norvell and his coaching staff and Mike Alford and everybody. But I don't know if it's super important as the main goal or the ultimate goal right now. If you look at the actions that this staff took in terms of who they hired and who they brought in, that they brought in a bunch of guys who really, I think they feel are high floor, some degree of certainty, high level of fit in the system, the Gus Malzahn offense that they decided to run. And I think intrinsic in that is also, perhaps not doing what they did in the last portal cycle, which I think in theory could have worked, but in practice did not. It doesn't mean that the methodology was terrible. It kind of blew up on them, and that can happen in this sport. And specifically here, the methodology I'm referring to is taking guys who have real high upside, who also you need to press into action now. I think that's a tough sell and a tough needle to thread ultimately, because a lot of those guys with the real high upside who are also ready to play now, a lot of those dudes are not actually in the portal, or they're crazy expensive. And so even the most moneyed teams can only afford one or two of them. So, last year they kind of gambled a little bit, thinking that, hey, we need to run this back. We got snubbed from the playoff, which I do think impacted their portal strategy. We just saw how Georgia's players look. A lot of our players don't look like those Georgia players. We need to get some guys who are similar body types to that, who can have that real high upside. But we also need them to play right now. I think if you look at what they did this year, it's not a real long-term approach the way they approach the portal. I think they're looking to get back to a bowl game comfortably, maybe win a game or two more, meaning 7-5, 8-4. If you want to dream on 9-3, I don't think that's the most likely outcome. I don't think it's completely outside of the range of possible outcomes, although I don't feel it's super likely. I mean, I don't know. Missing a bowl is probably slightly more likely than going 9-3. But again, as we'll get into in this episode, there's so much stuff that is still going to come with this team that we really have to get figured out, or at least to determine the possible ceiling of this team. So how do you mix in playing young players here with that in mind? If your goal is win enough ball games to where you don't get fired, so you can also still be employed next year, how do you square that with trying to build something for the future? And I'm going to get back to my comment of who are we selling this to? Who are we taking and playing young players and selling that narrative, which is factually backed that, hey, we just played a bunch of young players. Who are we selling that to? Is it to recruits? I think that possibly matters. Maybe a little bit less than it did before the NIL era, although certainly playing early helps increase your NIL value quite a bit, which more the traditional thought of NIL will likely matter more if the whole clearinghouse thing with the house case comes to pass. Or are you selling this to fans and donors? And I think that increasingly, might be a thing that needs to be done, actually. If I'm Mike Norvell, my first goal is to win this year. so that I'm employed by Florida State the next year. Like you kind of just want to, you know, keep kind of stay in that sentence that 2 and 10 inevitably brings, right? And give yourself a chance to work out of it, which he could certainly. But if people are like, hey, is this it? Now that you're kind of in this, win year to year type thing, and you decided to run, this offense, which again, we'll get into. I don't think it was a bad strategy for what they are able to get in the portal, what they were likely able to attract, even with having quite a bit of money to spend. I don't think it's a bad strategy. I think it's a strategy running this Malzahn offense that limits your ultimate upside. I do think it limits your ability to attract the type of talent that you need to win games number 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, if it ultimately came to that. I don't think it really limits your ability to win games 6, 7, 8, 9, which right now is real important. I mean, you would give quite a bit last year to win games 3, 4, 5, 6, but you only won games 1 and 2. So again, I do think you probably need something you can sell to some of these boosters and some of these fans long term so that they do renew their season tickets for 26, especially if some of your home games this year don't go the way that you want. Obviously, you're an 11-point, or maybe not so obviously, but if you did not know, FSU is an 11-point home underdog to an Alabama team. It looks pretty good. This year we got to figure out what quarterback is going to be over there, but I do think they have some nice stuff coming back at receiver. But ultimately, yes, everybody's excited about the changes, I think, as they should be. In any type of hope is generally a good thing. You want to put a product back on the field that fans can be proud of. I think this team did not play super hard at times last year. And if you want to disagree with me on that, I would just tell you to go watch the games again. And you let me know with some of the effort that we were seeing from some of these guys last year. So regaining a team that I think in part quit on you is a real key. That's going to get some people fired up. But ultimately, and almost regardless of when you went to school there, if you're listening to this show, you are of a mindset, and a justified one, that, hey, this is a program that should be competing for national titles. Maybe not every year, but I don't think anybody is cool with rolling out a plan long-term to where if the plan works, you're not in title contention. And I think that there is a risk of that here with what you're seeing some. I know we caught a bunch of hell for being very skeptical that the coaching changes were going to be like some kind of big time boon to recruiting. I didn't really see that. Personally, I don't think that is going to come to fruition. I know some other outlets did, but like most of the ones I think that are, more big time kind of shied away from that until they saw some of the results. And I think that was pretty smart to do. But yeah, I think you got to play some young guys out of necessity, but also probably having the ability to sell to fans, to boosters, also to other guys. Like, hey, we're building something here. And other guys, meaning your roster that you'll have to re-recruit every offseason, just like everybody now has to do in college football. And also your roster that you'll have to re-recruit, for the transfer portal. And then also the high school part of this, right? Getting a higher quality of player to come to Florida State. They have not done the whole top 10 class thing so far under Mike Norvell's tenure. Recruiting has not been a strength, for him. Obviously, we got asked if you saw this or not on Cover 3. And I was like, yeah, like there are a lot of similarities right now between Norvell and Dan Mullen and his time in Gainesville. Like what worked at Memphis so far has not worked in Tallahassee. What worked in Mississippi State so far has, there is no more so far. It just did not work in Gainesville. Now, at times it did. Obviously, Florida had 2 really nice seasons under Mullen. FSU had 2 really nice seasons under Norvell and got totally screwed out of the playoffs there in 23. But yeah, I think to the point of this question, yes, I do think it's pretty important that if you want to keep people long-term, that you play some young guys to kind of build that narrative. But that can't be the most important thing because there is no 26 if 25 completely falls off the rails. So win some games first, establish that you're back to at least a level of competency that you're not losing many, if any, of these ACC games to teams that you double up their spending. Like that last year, that was embarrassing. And I don't think fans will put up with that for long. They may not pony up for a buyout, but they certainly will not come to games and not support a team that is embarrassing to watch again. All right, next question here. Is it really a problem if Randy Pittman is your best player on offense? Which I think is probably intended as a joke, but I'm going to take the question because it does lend itself to a jumping off point about the offense, right? So if you saw the scrimmage reports, I would check out Knowles 24/7. Randy Pittman's certainly a guy who has had a nice impact on this team. That's the tight end transfer from UCF, a guy who, at the time that FSU was recruiting him, he wasn't really like FSU quality, so to speak, because the upside was rather limited, size, athleticism combo, but had the chance to be a solid to good college player, like not a big time pro prospect. And when you're recruiting at Florida State, you should be looking at guys who have real pro upside, not just like good college player upside, because you can get that type of player oftentimes in the transfer portal, as they did. So this is not a, hey, FSU should have taken Randy Pittman out of the high school level. Like, you can go get him in the portal, and there guys like that are fairly available. If he's your best player on offense, which again, I know some scrimmage reports had, I don't think that, look, yeah, it would be a huge problem if Randy Pittman is your best player on offense. I think the fact that he may have been your best player for a good bit of this spring speaks more to the fact that you have so many receivers right now, who are out with injury. Deuce Robinson, Squirrel White, a couple other guys. I know Knowles 24/7 Day reported that Hakeem Williams is dinged up as well. So it's kind of like, the scene in Major League where the construction workers and a couple other guys working in the trades, and they're like, who the hell are these guys? That's kind of the situation you have going on at receiver right now, which is why the passing game has looked really sketch, even relative to, I think, the modest expectations that I was going to have for this passing game, given the constraints of the offense that was chosen, and of course the quarterback to fit that offense in Tommy Castellanos, who, he's just not much of a thrower of the football. He's a guy who runs around a lot and can make some plays, and like definitely makes your run game a lot better, but not a guy who's going to go pro throwing the football by any stretch of the imagination, or really who can operate more of a pro style offense. So if Pittman actually was your best player in the fall on offense, it would be a massive problem. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think they're going to get Deuce Robinson back. Maybe they'll look to the portal to see another receiver. I think a lot of this depends on how does Squirrel White actually look. A lot of people out there are assuming that Squirrel White is going to get healthy and is going to immediately return to the form that he showed in 2023. And in 2023, he had some nice moments. He also had a huge Orange Bowl game there against Clemson for Tennessee. But we don't actually know that, right? And like, if he was guaranteed to get back to form, I wonder if Tennessee puts up more of a fight to keep him, right? It's not like he's upgrading in terms of the passing offense. Nico's a better quarterback than Castellanos is. And my skeptical brain, and you guys can call it negative if you want to. Like, I've been called negative before. Sometimes I'm right. I think a little bit less often I'm wrong. But like, my brain immediately thinks, okay, why is he available? What does Tennessee know? Are they dealing with better information, given that it's an in-house player, than you are? But yet the upside is clearly there if he can get back to form that he showed. And Mike Norvell has indicated in recent comments that he does think he's going to get back to full strength, and that he'll be back, soon. So Deuce Robinson, you can say like, hey, he wasn't great at USC. He was merely like a decent player. You'll take that. You'll take decent in this offense after some of the receiver play has been in some recent years, although not 2 years ago. 2 years ago with Keon and Johnny and those guys, it was actually it was quite good. But you'll take that for sure. If White can be a serviceable number two for you, a guy who does have some home run ability due to that deep speed, I think you'll take that, and you work in some of the young guys there as well. Maybe you get something out of Jaylen Brown finally. I don't know. Like, I've always been kind of a very like Jaylen Brown skeptic after LSU let him go. But and by let him go, I don't mean they cut him. Just like, if you're losing players on your team elsewhere to programs that you feel like are equal, I'm immediately thinking like, okay, what are we doing here? Like what do they know that we don't know? I am not super worried right now about the offense being rather dominated by the defense because we know how many guys didn't play in the scrimmage, right? Both tackles were out. That's been reported. And if you talk to anybody who's been to these practices, like I don't think that's a thing that just happened. Like they've been operating, down quite a few guys. I think the good thing is that on offense, unless I'm missing somebody, I don't think most of these injuries are long-term stuff. So it's a mega bummer that you're not able to like get the whole going through the motions mechanics of the new offense down with your likely starters as much this spring as you would want to. Well, I think it's important that Castellanos, even though he already knows the system because he played for Gus, I do think it's important that he gets more reps in there as he's getting now, even if it's not with all of the other guys who I think we would project to be the ones. If they were getting dominated by this defense, of which the personnel I don't think is amazing, and the starters were in there, then I'd be like, oh God, like they're going to go 4-8. And look, they could go 4-8. I don't think they're going to go 4-8, but assuming they return to decent help on offense, and if Randy Pittman is your third best pass catching target, a guy who's also like a decent willing blocker at times, then like that offense could be an upper half offense in this conference. You're like, which offenses do you really think are better? NC State, okay. Clemson, Miami, I think almost in the blind. I would take them at this point. Georgia Tech, probably because I think they have something nice going there. Louisville, that's 5. I mean, could Florida State be like 6th, 7th, or 8th best offense in this conference? Maybe. Like maybe Chroma, like the stud running back you signed out of Georgia, like maybe he jumps in and gives you something, big time. Maybe Cam Davis or Roy Dale look better running behind an offensive line that actually has its full complement of starters. I don't know. I mean, I assume they're not going to look worse if the holes are there for them. Like those are guys who I don't think do a good job of dancing in the backfield if you have people all over them. And, from all the scrimmage reports and just from what I had heard as well, it seems like there was a lot of penetration because you just didn't have your starting offensive linemen. Multiple guys were out, and no team's going to have great backup offensive linemen. If you go 2-10, you can kiss the chance of having good backup offensive linemen by. Like people can talk about the nice idea of let's have functional depth, but I mean, come on, guys, let's be real. You're not you're probably not going to maintain that right now. So yeah, that's a pretty good question. I'm not that worried about this offense. I actually do trust Gus Malzahn and Mike, assuming that they get their players back. And as far as I know, again, these offensive injuries I don't think are like super, super serious. So they should get their guys back. I don't think it's that complicated of an offense to run. Like reasonably, I do think they will score on East Texas A&M, Kent State, obviously, on Virginia, on Stanford, who, by the way, just lost a starting corner and lost a defensive end to the portal in this week after their dismissal of their head coach, against Wake, probably against Virginia Tech, and maybe against NC State. I don't know how much they're going to score on Pitt, although I think it's possible that they do. At Clemson, probably not a game that I think you'll score very much. At Florida, ditto. At NC State, could be tough. Hosting Miami and Bama, obviously very tough as well. But there's no rule that says you can't rise up and score a little extra points there against those teams, right? So good question there. Appreciate it. Patreon.com/Nolecast. You can drop any questions here. I try to take almost all the good ones, especially if it's going to make for good show fodder. Other ones I try to respond to via direct message. All right, next question here is, of course, from Patreon, but also is brought to you by Congruity HR Solutions. I think we've had 10 businesses decide to use our partners there at Congruity. HR, payroll, health insurance, whatever you need to optimize your business operations. Matt Lewis at Congruity will hook you up. Got a new email for them, by the way. Congruity@congruityhr.com. That's Congruity@congruityhr.com. Matt absolutely crushes it for us. His team is awesome. And again, like we don't recommend products on this show that we don't actually use, and we use Congruity. They're great for us. I think they'll be great for your business as well. Give them a shout. Maybe you can become number 11. That's a pretty cool number there to have associated with us and our partners at Congruity. So where does FSU stand with quarterback recruiting, and what is the plan going forward? So good timing on this. I was actually down at the Elite 11 in Tampa over the weekend and got to see a number of quarterbacks in the state throw and a couple from from out of state as well, including Bo Bentley. So Bo Bentley was a guy who FSU was in on. He's out of Texas, good athlete, solid thrower. I will say he did not have the best day. His tape is much better than how he performed at the Elite 11. But he had eliminated FSU from his final three, which is like LSU, Oklahoma, and maybe Georgia. I've kind of forgot there. But the important name is that like FSU was not in the mix there any longer. And they had another kid they were recruiting who kind of like back burner recruiting, who went to West Virginia. They seem to be kind of trending away with a kid named Landon Duckworth, who's out of Alabama, but he is pretty mobile. Ultimately, a couple things will determine this. Like with a kid like Duckworth, he's very involved with Ole Miss. But like, what happens if Austin Simmons comes out and kills it this year for Ole Miss? Like, is that something that is going to affect Duckworth? Like, maybe. He's a good athlete. I could see him actually fitting in, this offense pretty nicely. I know they're involved with Jaden O'Neal, the four-star guy who's been involved with Oklahoma a lot, current Oklahoma commitment. I think he fits this offense okay, but I guess we'll have to see. If I was doing this, and I said this to Brendan Sonnone on Twitter a couple of days ago, and I wasn't joking, I would moneyball this. Unless I have like a real Cam Newton type drop in my lap. And that's literally what happened with Malzahn when he was at Auburn. Like Newton was the heir apparent at UF, definitely a better player than Tebow in terms of ability. He gets popped for stealing a laptop and throwing it out the window there in Gainesville, gets booted, goes to junior college in Texas at, was it Tyler, I think, and wins a national title. Ends up being a guy recruited by Auburn and by Mississippi State, which I think at the time was Dan Mullen. Or maybe not. Mullen might have been there by that time. I think so. Anyway, unless you get a guy like that, I would save money at the quarterback position. Quarterbacks are your most expensive position on the roster by far. But you don't actually need a real good thrower to run this offense. And I think, let's think about the inverse. If you did acquire a really good thrower to run this offense, are you actually going to get value out of this player relative to what you had to pay? And I think the pay thing is important here too, because you're probably going to have to overpay that player to come in and run a spread option offense, which is basically what you're running. And I think the same thing is kind of true for a receiver. Now, you might want to say, Bud, I would spend up, I'd really pay a receiver here, like a single receiver, because I think you could force feed that target in this offense. And I don't hate that line of thinking, but instead of paying a couple million a year for a big time quarterback prospect, I think I could get similar wins above replacement type performance out of a guy who's really a runner, especially relative to the dollar value. And then I'm not saying hoard that money and keep it for myself. Let's spread that money out to some other premium positions that you think maybe you can get more out of in this offense or on that defense than maybe you could otherwise. So do you really want to be in a position where you're overpaying, and I think it's a forced overpay, to get a guy who's a really good thrower to come to this offense? Or do you want to kind of moneyball this thing? I think if you hire Gus Malzahn, you should not be spending much money on the quarterback position, period. Get a runner. Castellanos is a runner. Like teams that throw the ball effectively are not considering him as an option in the transfer portal market. They're just not. I don't know. I am not fretting over this quarterback recruiting stuff at all right now, because I do think there are so many so many guys you could go get on the cheap who can run this offense at a level that would allow you to make a bowl game, and then take that money and spend it elsewhere. All right, Terry writes, after spring, which positions are you more encouraged by? And spring's not done yet, obviously, but we're a decent bit of the way through spring. And I know they haven't been able to get as much done in spring as I think they would have hoped. We already went over this with all the injury stuff that they've gone through. So after spring, which positions are you more encouraged by, and which ones give you more concern than you had prior to entering spring? It's a pretty good question. So I think tight end, probably more encouraged by. Part of that is because Pittman has had a ton of balls because a lot of the receivers have been out. But I think you're seeing some progress from the young tight ends as well. Marquise Douglas is in better shape now than he was when he was in Tallahassee the last time. They were very unhappy with his physical conditioning the last time he was in Tallahassee, and I think it maybe having to leave a program like this to go out west, and ultimately he was on a college football playoff team at Arizona State, which was wild, and great job by Dillingham there last year. So that to me is more encouraging. I've heard some people say linebacker, but I'm kind of going to need to see it. I've also had some people tell me they think Earl Little. I told you guys this before spring, that like there are guys on that staff who really think Earl Little has a chance to be a good player for them. That's a real hard one for me to buy into until I actually see it with my own eyes, because he was essentially unplayably bad last year. And I'm not trying to take shots at the guy, but if you watch how he played, I mean, the instincts, the vision that he had of flow and of play development was lacking to the extent that he was basically not a playable player. So definitely would say those guys. Concerns, I don't think I'm actually concerned about receiver, assuming they get back healthy. I'm definitely kind of concerned about D-line with some of the injuries until we get a little more status on some of the injuries that they've had there. So D-line for sure. I don't think they're like super dominant at corner, but I'm open to being wrong there. I know some guys on the staff do think they're pretty good at corner. So I would say D-line is probably my biggest increased concern coming out of spring ball. And I think that they probably should try to attack that spot in the portal, which is actually leading into the next question, which is why I want to tell you, of course, oh man, the Rays just went down 1-0. Why I wanted to tell you about Madison Social and Township and Charlie Park. Awesome restaurant concepts from our friend Matt Thompson. They do such a great job. Madso, great spot to grab a burger, a beer, wings, whatever, like an elevated sports bar concept. Really awesome. Charlie Park as well, rooftop. I think you guys have heard the read a bunch of times. Charlie Park is the goods. If you want to have a little graduation ceremony there, that's pretty cool too. Grab drinks, grab dinner, whatever you want to do at Charlie Park. I think that is the spot to go to. Where would you attack in the spring portal if you're FSU? I can answer this better if you gave me the medicals and you said, we know we're getting this guy back. We know we're getting that guy back. But since we don't actually have those medicals, I think we have to fly a little bit blind here. D-line is probably not negotiable. I know there were a lot of positive reports about the Desir twins coming out of the first scrimmage that was open to the media. And I'm not saying that's not possible for those guys to be good this year. But I'm saying, as someone who's seen those dudes in person several years in a row at these Under Armour camps, they didn't do anything special last March. And it's very possible that they have developed enough in a year that they're now usable, good college players. And I know they're getting a lot of hype from other guys on the team. But there's a part of me that's like, wait a second, hold on. Are they getting hyped because they're the ones actually in the lineup because other guys are hurt and they're also facing a bunch of backup offensive linemen right now? How are they going to be against like starting caliber conference competition? How are they going to be against Alabama and Florida? Like, do I think it's likely that they're going to be competent football players against the top half of your schedule? I do not. And I'm not trying to be a hater on this. I just have to trust what I've seen. Okay. And what I've seen when they go up against other elite talent that the big time programs recruit, it's not been bad. It's just like they're not winning those reps, like not many of them. So, we'll see if the Desir twins are dudes. I think you could use another body there on the defensive line for sure. You could probably use one in the secondary, but I think the hope is that the young guys there are able to get healthy and step up. People say go take another offensive tackle in the portal. I just don't think that's realistic in terms of the money to spend. And who else is out there you can go get who's not a guaranteed starter? Like, you're not going to get a good backup to come off a team that just went 2-10, personally. So maybe a receiver you could show, and I think you may need to go get one just for depth purposes if some of these injuries are a little more concerning than the coaching staff has let on, but could be wrong there. So I would say D-line is my number one renewed concern coming out. I heard Jeff Cameron say portal or quarterback would be his, and I get it. Like, Castellanos has not lit the world on fire for you so far, but he's a runner. They're not going to let him get hit in spring very much. So I don't know like what the expectation is really, and clearly with the offense that you chose to run to get yourself back to bowl eligibility to save your job, I think he's a great fit. So for me, it's D line and maybe receiver. You could say maybe DB, but I think like D line is the one that everybody needs to have circled right now, because you also need some of your young guys you signed to actually step up and to play well and to play their potential. Because if they don't, it's like, okay, you're getting some band-aids there from the transfer portal, but I don't think you have like a whole lot, like a whole lot there. So, all right, talk to you guys again next week. Let me know. Send me more questions for sure. Anything you want to talk about, we are game to talk about. So with that, this has been the Nolecast. Happy Masters Week.